Hello, everybody, and welcome to this stream. In this stream, we are going to take a look at some of the source code of Flare, which is an exception tracker service specially built for Laravel applications. We added a new feature to it. We have now a nice GitHub integration, and we'll show you in this stream how it works under the hood. I'm not going to do this alone. We have a special guest. Let me bring him on. And here's my colleague, Ruben.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Frick.
All good?
Yeah. It's
You're
nice
sitting
weather
in like
outside.
the office, like the only person at the office right now, right?
Yeah. The government doesn't allow any more people in this office at the moment, so I'm all
Yeah.
alone over here.
But I can figure that it must be nice to be outside of your house also and working in another place.
Yeah, true. I saw my room like for a whole year and nothing else, so I'm really happy to be in the office here today.
Cool. Well, in your room at the house, you haven't been sitting still. You've added or largely helped add a very nice feature to Flare that we are going to talk about.
Yes.
So I'm going to demonstrate the feature first, so everybody knows what we're talking about, and then we'll dive into some of the code.
Yeah, great idea.
Let me share my screen. I'm going to do a little bit of window management before I share my screen. So let's move this out of the way and let's share the screen. Which screen? My main screen. And there you have it. And we don't need this one. So this isn't like a commercial talk, but in order to understand what's going on, you need to know what Flare is and how the feature actually works. So I've said it in the intro. Laravel Flare is an exception tracker, especially built for Laravel applications. So if there is an exception in a production environment of your application, if you wouldn't do anything about it, you probably wouldn't know that an exception has occurred. Maybe your client or your user will contact you, but you really don't want to count on that. So what you can do with Flare is that you can let your application send all of the exceptions to Flare, and Flare can notify you when an exception did occur, so you can solve it proactively. Let's maybe go into the app. So I've already created a demo account for myself. And how Flare works is that you can have like multiple projects. And I have a project freek.dev here that I'm going to use, but you can name it, of course, any way that you want. What you can do with the new GitHub integration is that when a new error comes in, you can create a GitHub issue for that. And when you close that GitHub issue, we mark the error as resolved in Flare. So let's see how that works. So how you should get started with this feature is that you should go to the team settings, and there's like a new GitHub screen here. And here you can connect your Flare account to GitHub. So let's do that. We are going to connect it. Yeah, I have multiple, how is this called? Organizations where I belong to, where I can choose from. I'm going to use my personal one. And here you can say to which repositories that Flare should have access. We only need access to write some things. We don't need access to any other settings. So I think if you have a lot of repositories in project, just leaving all repositories on is fine. But if you only want to give us access to some repositories, you can just choose some here. And I'm going to do that. So I've already set up a stream repository that we are going to use in this demo. So let's install and authorize this. And now you can see that Flare is connected to the Freek Merze organization. And this is connected for the entire team. So I have a stream team here. Now, how can Flare know to which repository an issue should be created for an error? Well, you can specify that on the project settings. So on the project settings, there's a GitHub screen as well. And here you can say, hey, all of the errors here, they concern some code in this repository, in the stream test repository. Let's save this, and now we are connected. Okay, let's see how this works when you've all set it up. So I have no errors here. So I'm going to send an error to Flare. Let's start the terminal, and it takes a while. Xcode build is doing something. It's probably because I've upgraded to a new OS version a little bit earlier. So let's go to not oh dear, but to freek.dev. And here I've already installed Flare and configured it to send errors to this project. I'm not going to bore you with that. It's actually very simple. It's just setting a configuration key. So here we are going to send exception, and the exception has now been sent. And if we're a little bit lucky, because all of this error processing is being queued, so it might take a while before our error gets here. It usually takes about maybe 10, 20 seconds. Then we should see it here. We're fast here. So here's the error. And this is the new thing. Like here, you can create an issue for this error. So you know that somebody on the team is working on this. So let's do that. We are going to create an issue. And here you can see that we are going to create an issue on that stream test repository. We add a title here. Let me already just submit this, so you can see it how it looks like formatted. We see the error class here, where the error occurred. You even see the frame where it occurred here, the file where it occurred here, and we have a link to Flare here as well. So if I click this link, we go back here, and you can see here that we have coupled one issue. So it is connected via here as well. What I can do is mark it as resolved here. And then if you chose it in the project settings, then Flare will automatically close that issue for you. But I think that in most cases, it will happen the other way around, where you've worked on an exception and you just mark it as closed in GitHub, and then we will see that. So my colleague Ruben, he has already fixed this. So yeah, he's a quick one. And you can see here that the Flare bot here automatically says like, "Hey, this issue was resolved." So I marked the error in Flare as resolved as well. And if I refresh here, then you can see that it was resolved by Ruben less than a minute ago. So yeah, this is how this feature works. And yeah, we've been testing this internally for quite some time now. And yeah, I really like it, because it's like a feature that we were missing. Now there's one more place where you can create an issue, and let's see if I can show you that. So when where is it? Here it is. When we mail you, I should say this in another way. So when a new error occurs and is being sent to Flare, then Flare can notify you. And one of the ways it can notify you is via mail. And here you can see a summary of that error. And one new button that we have here is Create GitHub Issue. And if you click here, you can create an issue for that error right from your mail without being logged in Flare. And I think that's a really nice workflow. So you can just use this feature without even having to log into Flare. Ruben, did I miss anything in this
I
little
think it's
demo?
important to say we also take a look at pull requests. So we link these errors with GitHub issues and pull requests via the link you use. So the Flare URL, if you share it somewhere on GitHub, we'll probably link it. So it really works seamlessly.
Yeah, and if you have a PR here, then there's like another subheading here, PRs, and it lists the PRs here.
That's true. And if you merge a PR, you also see that the PR is merged right here in the error, which is really nice, I think.
Yeah. And then if you merge a PR, then you also get like a comment like this, right? Where the Flare lets you know on GitHub, like we've closed some things.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool. So yeah, maybe let's look at some of the code that drives this. I should say that the idea of doing this stream, it really originated when we were pairing a little bit on this or doing the code review for this before we merged it, and I was like so impressed with like how elegant that it works that I think it would be nice to share with outsiders or with people beyond our company as well. So let me add your screen to the stream.
Yes, thank you.
So that you can explain us all of this magic. I should also say, if there are any questions, just let us know in the comments. I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible, or if I don't know the answer, or if it requires some more explanation, then maybe we can do it after Ruben is done. Then we'll handle those questions.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
Take it away.
All right, let's take a look at this. So we're going to take a look at the GitHub integration. And I think this is really interesting because we don't often see how we integrate at Spatie external services like GitHub. So let's take a look. Now, how does this integration work? We actually have two parts. We have a Webhooks part and an API part. So we subscribe by installing GitHub into Flare to the webhooks of GitHub. And these are events like, hey, you created a new repository for your organization, or you removed one. Or as you can see, as we saw earlier, you can select, let Flare see all my repositories, or let it see only select repositories. So we need to take care of all these webhooks coming in and change everything in Flare so everything keeps working correctly. Other webhooks might be you've added an issue, you commented something on an issue, closed an issue, created a PR, and so on. We're first going to take a look at how these webhooks come in and how we process them. And at a certain point, we will do something with these webhooks and call the API. And we're also going to take a small look at that.
All right, so that's like the first part. So this is how we react to when something happens at GitHub. Then GitHub sends us a webhook and we process that, right?
Yeah, indeed. And it actually all happens in one big job, a Laravel job. So this is the process GitHub webhook job. And this works with our Spatie Laravel webhook client package. So what do we get here? We get a payload, and a payload is just an array we get from GitHub. And in this payload, there's a lot of information, like, for example, the installation we're working on, the sender of the payload, the type of payload. Is it an issue we created? Is it a repository that was created? And also we get an action, which is mostly we created something, we deleted something, we edited something. This payload, we will send it through a few webhook handlers. What are webhook handlers? They take a payload and they will take a look at it. Can I work with this payload? Can I do something with this? If they can, then they will take the payload, do something with it, and we stop the job. The first example we have here is an ignored webhook handler. And it's actually a really simple one. Just take a look at if the action isn't created and it concerns something with the installation. That means there is a permissions key in the payload. It's a bit fake, but in that case, let's stop, because we don't want to handle these kinds of webhooks. Then we go a step further. And at this point, we know this webhook is interesting. We want to do something with this. And the first thing we're going to try to do is find a theme. And finding a theme is actually really simple. In every payload, there is an installation ID. And in the beginning, when we installed GitHub for a theme in Flare, we received from GitHub an installation ID. So we know this theme is connected with this GitHub installation ID. So we find a theme. In case we don't find a theme, we log something. This is just, for us, with sometimes I think twice per month, we take a look at these logs and see if a theme without installation ID exists and what happened. But at this point, we shouldn't continue actually. So normally, if everything is going correctly, we now have a theme, which is just a Laravel model. It's something in the database, and we know this theme, I can work with it. The first webhook handler that's I think is really interesting is the installation webhook handler. And this webhook handler will take a look at the current GitHub installation you have. So let's say you create an installation where there's a few repositories and you add another repository, then we want to also add this repository to Flare, because we store each repository also as a model, so we can easily link with it in our Flare application. Let's take a look at the installation webhook handler. So there are a few actions that can happen here. For example, you can unarchive the GitHub installation or archive the GitHub installation. That's an option. If you have an application within GitHub, then you can archive it or unarchive it. If such a webhook comes in, we really want to handle this because we want to remove or restore everything concerning that installation. If for some reason you rename the repository, since we have a list of all the repositories you have on GitHub, actually only the names, we also want to rename these repositories internally. If you edit a repository, removed the repository, deleted the repository, or suspended access, then we also want to do something. We want to change something in Flare. So this is the should handle webhook. It will return true or false depending on the action. And if it returns true, then we go to this handle method. Again, now we
have a double match whammy there.
Yeah,
Nice.
We actually could combine them, but I really like it that it's two methods, because this is really like a hard stop. Like, okay, it's true, let's continue. It's false, stop here and continue to the next step in this process webhook job. If it's true, we know we're going to handle it here, and after this, the execution of the job stops. Which I really like, because nothing else can happen after this. Let's go through some of these things. Let's see, for example, how in the repository is added. So in this case, we have in our GitHub webhook payload a key repository is added, which is actually really simple. It's just the names of the repositories you have added. So what we do is we create a Laravel model with a theme, with the owner of the GitHub repository. In our case, that would be Spatie, and the name of the repository, the name you gave it. And that's it. We now have new repositories. For example, removal of repositories is actually a bit the same. We also have a repositories removed key in the webhook payload, and we will just remove them all. That's it. If we archive a repository, we need to search for that repository, and we will also delete it. If we unarchive it, the repository, then we have to create it once again. If we rename a repository, GitHub payloads are really big, but they have lots and lots of useful information. So we also have the previous name. So the only thing we have to do is actually search for the previous repository and just rename it with a new name. That's actually happening here.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that GitHub repository, that is just a table at
it's actually really simple,
right?
Yeah. So it has a theme to which it belongs, to which you installed GitHub. It has an owner, which is probably Spatie or Ruben van Assen or Freek Murze, your account you linked, and the name of the repository. So it's a really simple table but it's really important because we're going to link all our references between errors and GitHub issues or PRs with this repository. So if we remove this repository, all the issues internally in Flare will also be removed due to fraudulent keys.
Yeah.
And that makes cleaning up things really, really easy because the database takes that, does that job for us.
Yes.
Um,
Gotcha.
These are, I think, the most important parts in the installation webhook handler. So let's continue a bit. And this is a really interesting one. Webhook was triggered by action in Flare. What's happening here? So in the demo Freek gave earlier, you saw we added an issue to GitHub and we closed the error in Flare. We resolved the error in Flare, which closed the issue in GitHub. And then we add a comment like, hey, we closed this error. You resolved this error in Flare, so we closed this issue.
Yeah, that's the Flare bot that added the comment
Yeah,
to the.
yeah, that's true. And in this case, we just want to ignore these messages. So that's why Webhook is triggered in Flare. We're going to look like sender login. It's just a key again in the big GitHub Webhook payload. If it's equals to a GitHub app name we configured in our .env file, then we know it's coming from us. It's coming from Flare. So we're going to stop execution of the job because we're not going to check our own webhooks, the things we did ourselves. Actually, the things Flare bot did itself. Okay, so we just continue a bit further in our process webhook job. At this point, we've handled all the webhooks that have something to do with the team, with repositories. At this point, we're really going we're going to look at a repository, a single repository, so issues and PRs attached to a repository. So at this point, we also want a repository. So we're going to find that repository model we created earlier by the other webhooks within our database. And that's what the find repository method does. It searches for a GitHub repository. We also take the projects that are connected with this GitHub repository. And what we actually do is in our payload we have here now, we have an owner and a name. So normally we should find a repository. If we don't, once again, we stop this processing webhook because this repository is not linked to any of the projects on Flare, so we can just ignore it. But if we find a repository, there is probably one or more projects that are attached to it, so we can handle a webhook for a project. And that's the next method we're going to take a look at. Here, once again, we're going to take a look at the webhook action. We take it from the payload. And we have two interesting webhook handlers. The first one is the issue PR webhook handler, which will handle the creation or deletion or merging from PRs and issues. There's something you need to know. GitHub sees a PR and an issue as the same thing. So at the moment you create an issue, it's actually just an issue. But at the moment you create a pull request or a PR, you would expect it's something different, but actually you're creating an issue which also has a pull request. That's why when you create an issue with number 1 and you create a pull request, it will have number 2, and the next issue will have number 3, because at that moment there are 3 issues created. So we can combine these two types into one thing, which we call the issue PR webhook handler.
Yeah, I think you can also see at GitHub that it's the same thing because they use like the same IDs, right? If you do like create an issue on GitHub, that's issue number 1, another one that's issue number 2. But if you create like a PR, then that's PR number 3 then, right?
Yeah, you can actually, let's say you have a PR with number 3, you can search for an issue with number 3. It won't show up in the index list, but if you just change URL with number 3, you will see an issue, but it's actually a PR. So yeah, I think GitHub started with issues and added PRs as an extra feature to issues. And that's why we now have this kind of strange concept of issue PR. Can be both. Okay, let's take a further look. Once again, we have a should handle webhook. If this comes out true, we're going to handle it. If this comes out false, yeah, we're going to continue. So let's take a look at that one. In this case, we want to have an issue payload in our webhook, or we want to have a pull request payload in our pull request key in our payload. In the case we have a comment key in our payload, then we want to stop. Why is that? Because we also have an issue PR comment webhook handler, and that one will handle the payload in this case. So let's take a look at the handle method. And there are 4 actions. So there's a closed action, deleted, reopened, or edited action. And I think these are really important. So let's take a look at them all. The first one is a close action. And what we're going to do here is we're going to call the sync GitHub issue PR with Flare action. And this is a really interesting one, because what actually is going to happen, we're going to do the API part I talked about earlier. So we're going to take all the comments belonging to the issue or PR and try to get all the bodies, so everything you typed into this comments within an array. Why do we do that? Because the payloads GitHub sends us only contain information about the issue. So it contains the title or the contents typed within it, but it doesn't contain all the history, all the comments that were added before the Flare integration, for example, was added. So we want this history at this point, and that's why we're going to do a call to the GitHub API and ask for all the comments belonging to that PR or issue. We're doing this through a gateway, and I will come back later to this because I think it's a really interesting concept we're using here. But what you should know is this thing is going to get the comments for a team, for a repository, and for a certain issue or PR with a number. And what comes out are a few of DTOs or data transfer objects, and those look like this.
So for people that don't know, DTO is basically like a formal structure that you build. It is basically sort of super array where everything is typed and where you're certain of like the shape, right?
Yeah, it's an array with these kinds of objects. So it's a GitHub command data objects, and these are really, really simple objects. Thanks to PHP 8, we now can do property promotion, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And we can, really create simple objects like this with a public ID, with a public string, which is the owner, and a public string, the body. So we now have an array with these GitHub comment data objects. What we're now going to do is we're going to try to get the bodies. And what do I mean with bodies? Bodies are things you typed into GitHub. So the title of a PR or the title of an issue, the body of a PR, the body of an issue, and then all the bodies of the comments belonging to that issue or PR. And we all add them to one array we call bodies. And now we're going to give them to the find Flare references in text action. I'm not going to go over this action completely. What it actually does, we give it a theme and we give it some text, and within this text, it's going to, via regex, search for URLs, and in the end, it will find, references. We've called them errors. Excuse me. We're going to find the errors attached to that URL. So let's say you added an URL to the error Freek showed us a few moments ago with the Flare test exception, then we're going to find the error within Flare, which is also a database model. So in the end, what comes out, what goes in is the bodies of an issue. So all the text you typed into an issue or a PR, and in the end comes out all the errors belonging to that issue. So these are actually database objects within Flare. Now what we're going to do is we're going to loop over these errors, and we're going to update or create GitHub issue PR models. And these are actually the references, the links between an error and a GitHub issue or a GitHub PR. As you can see, we have an ID of an error. We have the ID of a GitHub repository. We have a type, and type is PR or issue. We have the number, and we have a title and a status. The status we get from the webhook. So this will keep everything in sync. The last thing we need to do is we need to remove everything that's not that doesn't exist anymore. So for example, let's say you had an issue and you added the comment to it, and then you decided to remove it. And a few moments later, sync occurs. We want to remove that comment also. So if there was some reference to a Flare error within that comment, we want to remove that reference in the Flare application also. And that's what's happening here. So we're going to loop over all the models connecting an error with a GitHub issue or PR, where the type is of issue or PR with a certain number, and where the ID is not one of these IDs we created or updated earlier. And we're going to delete them all. That's what's happening in the end. This action will then return these references. And now we come back here to our sync GitHub issue PR, to our close method. I'm going to take some water.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that a seemingly simple feature is powered by quite a lot of code, but it's still manageable.
Yeah. There's a lot of going on when you add an issue. Now, since we're working here with issues and PRs, if you close an issue, you probably want to close. You want to resolve the error in Flare. If you close a PR, you probably don't want to resolve an error in Flare, because there is a difference in PRs where you can close a PR or you can merge a PR. When you close a PR, you mostly say, I don't like this PR, we're not going to merge this. So in that case, if that happens, so if it concerns a closed PR, we don't want to continue because we don't want to resolve this error, because this code is probably not getting merged. In the other case, when it concerns a PR, but it's merged, then we want to continue, of course, because at that moment the code is merged within the code base, so we know this probably will fix the error. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to loop over the references we created and updated earlier, and we're going to try to get the error from these references. So this is a model, and then we're going to take a unique approach to this error. So let's say you have a comment where you added 2 links to the same error. We only want to resolve this error one time, so let's make them unique. Now we're also going to reject errors that are already resolved, because we're not going to resolve errors that are already resolved. That is quite logical. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to mark the error as resolved action. We're going to execute it with the error and with the name of the sender of the payload, which will be my name or Freek's name of someone else's name, someone we closed the issue or merged the PR. If that's all done, we're going to pipe all these references within the add comment to GitHub issue PR with errors action. That's a really, really long name, but it's actually a really simple action. It's going to call the API and it's going to add a comment to a PR or to an issue with all the links to errors you just resolved by closing that issue or merging that PR. And that's what's happening when you handle a close, when a webhook comes in that closes a GitHub issue. When we have a delete, so let's say you deleted an issue or you deleted a PR, that's actually a bit really simple. We just remove all the references between errors and that PR or issue, because the issue or PR doesn't exist anymore. When we have a reopen, we are once again going to sync the issue and PR with Flare. We're going to update our internal status of this issue or PR to open, because you reopened it. We're going to take all the errors, make them unique again. At this moment, we're not going to take a look at errors that are not resolved, but we're going to take a look at errors that are not excuse me, I'm going to say this again. So at this moment, we're not going to take a look at errors that are not resolved, but we're going to take a look at errors that are already resolved because we want to reopen them. So that's what's actually happening here. We're going to filter errors and we're going to take only the errors that are already resolved. At this point, we're going to trigger the reopen error action, which will reopen the error. It will also send a mail to everyone who has notifications enabled, or a Slack message or something else. And we're going to pipe these errors again within the add comments to GitHub issue PR with the errors action, which is also going to add a comment. But in this case, it is a reopening comment because we are reopening errors on Flare because you reopened a PR or an issue. That's happening here. The last one is actually really simple. In the case you edit an issue or you open a new issue, the only thing we want to do is run this action. And at this point, we know Flare will have synced all the references between a GitHub issue and a error within Flare. And that is what's happening in the issue PR webhook handler. The issue PR comment webhook handler looks also really big, but it isn't. It only has one method. It will also sync the GitHub issue again, and it will fetch all the comments via API, so we know everything keeps in sync. I think that's the really interesting part about the webhooks. Now,
it seems a lot of code, but it's actually just a few very well-designed collection changes.
It is.
Here,
we add some things to the database and we remove some things. That's easily said. What's happening here, but there was a lot of research needed to build this. Because every webhook has some strange differences between them. Some things are really different. What is interesting, I think, and something we didn't show, is the gateways. So we have two API gateways. Internally, we're using a package which will make the calls to GitHub, and it will do all the authentication for us.
That's that KNP Labs package, right?
Yeah, that's true. Now GitHub actually only has one API, but it has two different authentication methods for the API. So in some points, we want to talk to the application. So to our application, we want to ask, hey, this user, which repositories does he have enabled? Which repositories can Flare see? But sometimes we also want to authenticate as a user and say like, hey, I'm the Flare bot and I want to add a comment to this issue on this repository from this user. So we have two APIs. And we split them into gateways, into API gateways, which is a really interesting concept because, for example, the user API, this is the only point where we will use the package. So the KNP Labs package will only be used here, and it's really confined within this method. So, for example, the get repositories method just gets our T model in it. Now we're going to get the connection, and here everything is going to happen with authentication and getting the correct tokens. At this point, we're using the package. So this means take the connection we just authenticated with GitHub. From the issues, take all the comments for this owner and for the owner of this repository and the name of this repository and for a certain number. And then we're going to map these data. So this is just an array coming from GitHub in this DTO structure we talked about earlier. So these are all things from our application going in. From here on, some things are going to happen with GitHub with an external package. But in the end, structures coming out are still structures existing within our application. So if something changes over here, we don't need to change something in our application, which is really nice, I think. Now we can update the package quite quickly because we only need to change this code and not throughout our complete code base search for references made with this package. Another nice thing about gateways is you can fake them. So each gateway also has a fake counterpart, like the fake GitHub user API. And what is this? This is actually a class extending this original API class, but it has some static properties and a constructor without arguments and a setup, which is a static function, and it will bind the fake GitHub user API as a GitHub user API within our application. So at the moment we're gonna start with testing, we can just write our tests and run our code, but no calls will be made to GitHub. We don't have to set up authentication, so we can to contact GitHub. No, everything is going to be put in these variables. You can see it over here. For example, the get issue PR comments just gets all the data objects we created within this key, and we can add them in a test in advance, set up these objects. So we can really easily test our GitHub integration without actually needing to connect to GitHub.
Yeah, these are basically handcrafted mocks, right? Where you want to mock something, but you just want to be in control of how it's done.
Yeah, we're totally in control.
If I'm not mistaken, there are also some assertion methods on here directly, right? Somewhere in this one or the other.
Yeah, over here. So assert issue is closed. We can call these directly from our test classes, and we just add an error GitHub issue PR, which is again a model. And we know at this point in our test, we can check if this issue was really closed by executing an API call. And of course, this API call isn't happening. It's just something that was added in an array within this class. But we can really assert that something has happened within the API.
Nice.
I think that concludes our integration. Is there something interesting to show? Maybe the close issue PRs for error job. That's a small one actually. So Freek told you guys you can add the option. You can enable the option in the settings. When you resolve an error on Flare, you also automatically resolve issues on Flare, and that's actually what's happening here. So resolving an error on Flare will trigger an event, and this event can trigger this job when that setting is enabled. And what we're going to do here, so we get our GitHub user API thing we looked a few moments ago at as a parameter in our handle method. The only thing we now need to do is we got the error here. We take all the references to issues and PRs, which are connected with this error. We take a look at all the issues and PR that are open and of the type issue, because we don't want to close or merge PRs. We're not going to do such things. And actually, that's it. Now we take the team and we take the GitHub user API. We say for this team, for this GitHub repository, and for this number, close it. And the last thing we need to do is also change the status of our internal model describing which issues are connected with the error, that it's now also closed. So really simple job, but a lot is happening actually here.
Cool. Yeah, I think something that wasn't mentioned yet is how the code is structured. So you created the domain of your own for this, a separate domain for this.
It's really something different than everything we had. We couldn't just put it in a domain like error or shared error. You can read more about this in Brent's book and Brent's blog about splitting things in your code in the domains, which is it's basically
Yeah.
how do you say it? We do it all the time at Spatie.
Yeah, it's basically like a way of like structuring a big application into smaller parts, and the smaller part is the domain, and the domain is basically like maybe a mini application or its own, something like that. Because you
you
see
can
like
call it that.
you can see like the directories that you expect to live beneath the app directory, they now live inside of a domain. Yeah.
Indeed. What I also really like about this, we have a lot of tests, of course, within our GitHub domain. And these tests are structured in domain folders within our test directory. So when you're working on this, you can just test the GitHub test folder and run all the tests in that folder. And you tested the whole integration. You don't need to test the block and docs and error domains because they don't have actually anything to do with this. Only the GitHub domain should be tested, and this can be done really easily, which is really nice because you don't need to run like 500 tests, but only 40 or so.
Cool. Thanks for walking us through this, Ruben. Yeah, I think you did like an excellent job here.
Thank you.
Yeah, like you said, it seems simple, but it's actually quite a lot of work to get it just right and get it tested and get it running. But I'm happy that we now have it out there, so we ourselves and our users can use this too.
Yes.
Maybe I'm going to show one little more thing in the code, but I'm going to share my screen for that. We haven't rehearsed this, but I was thinking about it while you were busy. Let's remove this screen, bring this screen back on. And what I want to show you is how we create this button here, the create GitHub issue button in our mail, and it's actually quite simple. Let's go to PHP Storm. It's actually on another screen. Where is here it is. So I was already going a little bit through it. So whenever we send a mail like this one, this is actually implemented as a notification in our code base. And you can see here that we have it in our notifications domain. And here you can see that we use a certain piece of markdown to the user. Let's hunt that down. So it's new error occurred. So this is basically the mail that we just saw. So this is that mail. And let's take a look at where these are rendered. These are rendered as part of the error occurrence card. And I should let you show it again. Let me just keep it in the view. Like this. So this here, the entire thing is the error occurrence card. Let's go to it. And if I remember correctly, we have like an array with signed URL actions here. So these little buttons, they actually work whenever you click on them without you being logged into Flare. And how do we do that? Well, we sign those URLs so we know for sure that this is a link that we sent to this user, and then we can check, hey, is his signature correct on Flare when this action comes in? Yeah, if I hover around this, yeah, then you see that the URL contains a signature. And there's like a third button here, and that third button isn't actually signed. I think it's just a URL. So let's go to maybe the code to see where the signed URLs, the signed actions are being generated. So let's go to the notification class again, and we see that it extends a a higher notification, I guess. So this is the notification that gets sent on new errors, but we also send notifications when like the 10 times something comes in, the 100 times something comes in, and so on. And that error, those errors, or those notifications, they all extend from this one. And if I remember correctly, we should have designed actions here. And here you can see that we generate the resolve action, and this is the URL. You can see that we actually have like a method on the error model itself to create the URL for that. The same for snooze. And here is the one for GitHub. And here you can see that we have an if check here. So we are only going to add that third link, the create GitHub issue link, whenever there's a repository coupled. Because if there's like not a repository coupled to the project, then we don't need this link. And how do we generate this link? Well, we do that in an action. And this action is actually used in multiple places in our code base. So this action, let's go to it. You can see that it lives in the GitHub domain. We have a couple of actions here, and one of them is that create GitHub issue URL action. So we use it in the mail, but we also use it in the UI. You saw me in the beginning when I said when I send an error to Flare, there's a little button like create issue. It uses the same code to render that. And it's actually, yeah, it is some code to create this, but most of the code revolves on creating like the snippet that you want as a body. It's actually pretty simple how a URL, how such a link looks like. It's basically a base URL where you add some parameters to it. So let's maybe take a look at the mail itself, and maybe let's just click it. And you can see that in this URL, all the necessary information to create this is handled. This isn't signed at all. This is just a basic URL, like a basic GET request to add some things. And this can be nice if you want to automate some things of your own as well. If you want to have like somewhere a button where you want to create an issue, you can't just do that. Just create a URL like this, give the title, give it the body, and you can do something like this. So it's pretty nice that GitHub enables us to do that in a very simple way.
It's actually also possible to give it a label or an assignee or so. So it's really, really extended. There is some documentation you can find somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure where.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you can
you can do a lot with it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, maybe we can do something with that in the future as well, so that you can maybe configure like which labels should be applied on new issues created by Flare. That could be an interesting as well.
That's actually a great idea.
Yeah, we'll talk about that after the stream.
Let's do that.
Okay, let's close it a little bit down because we're getting in the vicinity of an hour, and I think like an hour is like an excellent length for something for a stream. So yeah, if you're interested in test driving all of this yourself, give Flare a try. There's a 10-day free trial. I think it's not mentioned here because I'm logged in. So let me log out. Yeah, so here, start your free 10-day trial, no credit cards required. And you can just play around with everything that you saw in this stream. So I think we are at the end, Ruben. Unless you want to say something or think about something that we missed.
No, not at the moment.
Maybe I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm going to show my screen again. I want to emphasize that this is not the only feature that we've recently added. we've actually worked quite a lot the past few months to improve things behind the scenes, and we're now also adding features like those mail notifications that I saw you. They also allow to snooze and resolve errors. You can view your sprite protection. We have searchable docs now. You can see more information. You have more snoozing options now. And we got a couple of nice improvements in the pipeline as well. So it's really a good time to discover Flare, I think.
Yeah.
And if there's any feature that people do want to see, just let us know, I guess.
There's actually also a roadmap on GitHub, and I think there's a link beneath the docs in the purple bar, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's do it one more time here. It's the changelog is what we have done. So there you can see what we have done, and the roadmap.
It is the link to above. In the text, there is a link in the changelog. Indeed, send us our good ideas and check the roadmap on GitHub.
Here. My eye didn't follow on it. So here people can
create issues.
Create issues for features that they want, and here you can see the roadmap. Okay, that is, I guess, everything that we have for you. So thanks, Ruben, for joining me on the stream. I hope that you liked your very first stream.
It was a bit stressful, but I hope it was all right.
I hope that you liked it, and maybe we can do this another time with a little bit less stress. I also, to be honest, I also have like a little bit of stress in the beginning. I think that's perfectly fine.
Right.
Okay. We're done for now. Bye, everybody, and see you next time. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.